Ethiopia is one of the few countries in Africa that was never colonized, and because of it, a lot of their culture, a lot of their history is still preserved.
Their religion.
And their religion still preserved. And the great thing about Ethiopia I love is going to some of the churches and seeing a Jesus with an afro. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. For content on Africa and the diaspora's history, culture, and travels, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification and that like button so this content can be suggested to more people. And if you want to support Travel and Truth, you can do so by buying the Travel and Truth merchandise or donating in the links below. Located in East Africa, Ethiopia is one of the greatest nations to exist on this planet. It is a 3,000-year-old nation, making it one of the oldest nations on this planet. It's also one of the most unique countries I've ever visited. What makes Ethiopia so unique is that it's one of the only countries in Africa that was never colonized by Europeans. And because of this, it has one of the most unique cultures on the planet, as their culture has remained intact for thousands of years. Ethiopia is home to a royal lineage of black kings and queens that trace their lineage back to Queen Sheba and King Solomon of the Bible. Ethiopia is home of the Ark of the Covenant. It's the home of several rock-carved churches. It's the home of the ancient Axum Empire. It's the home of the African medieval castles. It's the home of the coffee bean. It's the home of a native Christian tradition as old as Constantine. And most important, Ethiopia is the birthplace of mankind. Ethiopia has a population of 109 million folks, which is the second largest population in Africa behind Nigeria. Ethiopia is a very large country with many places to visit all throughout the land. I finally got to Addis, and they had my luggage in the same section of, I think, 5 chickens and what looked like to be a lamb. Now that's my driver right there. He's crossing. Look at, yeah, that's the guy that's going to be my driver. He's crossing like 5 lanes of traffic. Of course, you don't really know how many lanes of traffic there is because there's no lines. All right, let's do this, my man. I start my journey in Ethiopia in the city of Addis Ababa. It is the capital of Ethiopia, and it's a city filled with monuments, museums, old churches, and business districts. I linked up with the youngest tour guide I've ever had in my life, who is showing me around the city and taking me to the tomb of the last king of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie. Just for the record, this is like the youngest tour guide I've ever had in my life, and it kind of happened on accident, but let's not talk about that right now. One? Take it for one? Okay. Yes. You really do know these people. Okay. Him. You know him?
Yes, I know him. Very well. Very well.
Okay. All right, so with the young fella, the young buck, the young tour guide is taking me to is the Holy Trinity Church. We will not be spending that much time in here, just for the record.
Yeah, quick. Because
I'm on time limit with the taxi cab driver. They done ran a number on me. We'll talk about that later. So anyway, yeah. So inside here is Haile Selassie's.
And his wife buried inside here.
Okay.
And the priest here.
Okay. Okay, how do I do this? Oh, cool.
So we put our dishes here.
Once inside the church, we walk to the back to get a glimpse of the 2 caskets.
So this is his wife when she comes to the church, this church. She sits here every time. Like a lot of times, Sunday.
Okay.
Like today. And this is Haile Selassie's chair.
Oh, okay. So they came to this church every Sunday.
What?
They came to this church every Sunday.
Yeah. Also, they built this. So this is the burial of Haile Selassie and his wife buried at the inside here.
So right now I'm at the burial of Haile Selassie. This is where he is buried with him and his wife. So special. Inside that casket is black history like no other. Haile Selassie was the 225th emperor of Ethiopia and is the last emperor of the Solomonic Dynasty. The Solomonic Dynasty of Ethiopia is a royal dynasty that ruled the Ethiopian Empire as early as the 10th century BC. According to ancient Ethiopian books such as the Kebra Nagast, King Solomon of Israel and Queen Sheba of the Damat Kingdom, which is located in present-day Ethiopia, they both had a love affair and they had a love child named Menelik I. After Queen Sheba dies, Menelik becomes king and begins a long line of Ethiopian royalty who claim to be direct descendants of Queen Sheba and King Solomon. This Solomonic dynasty ruled Ethiopia for almost 3,000 years and had 225 generations of Ethiopian kings and queens. Many of these kings and queens are still celebrated throughout Ethiopia for their achievements and their many great monuments, churches, and works of art that they built that are still in existence until this day after thousands of years. And many of these rulers defended the Ethiopian Empire from other empires and foreign invaders in famous battles that are still celebrated as national holidays all throughout the land. This dynasty was well known all around the world for thousands of years for its prestige and power. And what's dope about traveling in Ethiopia is that everywhere you go, you're constantly reminded of this royal lineage. All over different cities, you'll see statues, paintings, and photos of the famous emperors of this great nation. The empire lasted from the 10th century BC all the way up to 1976, which leads us to Emperor Haile Selassie and his wife, Empress Menen Asfa, the two people inside these tombs. Born in 1892 with the name Lij Tafari Makonnen, he was the son of General Ras Makonnen, a member of the Ethiopian royal family and one of the military leaders who fought off the Italians. Haile Selassie is of the bloodline of King Solomon and Queen Sheba through his paternal grandmother. Now, he spent much of his 20s as a regent under Empress Zawditu. When Empress Zawditu dies in 1930, he is then crowned Emperor of Ethiopia and takes the name Haile Selassie, which roughly translates to Power of the Trinity. During his early reign, the economy booms thanks to the export of coffee and other goods. Now, with all this money that the Ethiopians were making, it made other countries ripe with jealousy, mainly the Italians. And in 1935, the Italians, led by fascist dictator Mussolini, reneged on a 20-year peace treaty and invaded Ethiopia with a large force. They briefly occupied the nation, which then sent Haile Selassie into exile into England for a few years. In exile, he becomes a vocal force for the liberation of Africa and the fight against fascism pre-World War II. In 1941, Selassie returns to Ethiopia as emperor after years of the Italians facing guerrilla warfare from the locals and a war with the British. In the next several decades of his life, the emperor contributed heavily to Pan-Africanism. Under Selassie, Ethiopia was part of a leadership role in Africa by uniting African countries in the fight to gain their independence from colonization. Selassie presided over the formation of the OAU, which was the precursor to the African Union. He was selected as the first president of the OAU. He would initiate the concept of the United States of Africa, which would be a federation of 54 countries of Africa, which was the concept first pioneered by Marcus Garvey. And speaking of Jamaicans, in the 1930s, Selassie became regarded as the prophet, Messiah, or the second coming of Christ to a group of Jamaicans known as Rastafarians. The name Rastafari comes from Selassie's regent name before he was crowned emperor, Ras Tafari Makonnen. Prior to the Rastafarian movement, many Jamaicans believed that a black messiah from Africa would soon liberate black people worldwide. They would come to believe that Selassie was that messiah due to his Solomonic bloodline, but also, this was at a time when Ethiopia was viewed by black people in the diaspora as this mystical land of black kings and queens who successfully fought off European colonizers for ages. This was also at the same time where images of Haile Selassie's elegant coronation went all around the globe. This was such a stark contrast to the rest of the black people around the world who were either colonized or heavily oppressed at that time, and who would view images of Selassie's coronation like a beacon of light, hope, and inspiration. It isn't hard to see how Selassie could be viewed as the chosen one, as no other black man garnered such power and respect in those days. And if you ever had any doubts of how much power and respect the Ethiopian Empire had, here's a controversial and disputed photo of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip bowing to Emperor Haile Selassie and the Empress. This is at a time when the British Empire ruled over 23% of the world's population. And to add more fuel to the belief that Selassie was the Black Messiah, there's a 1,500-year-old painting of Jesus, which looks a lot like Haile Selassie, receding hairline and all. Now, Selassie's reign was not all roses. While some looked at him as a hero or a messiah, there are others who regard him as an unjust dictator. In the 1960s and 70s, Ethiopia went through a series of famines which led to tens of thousands of people dying. Many protested on and off for years as they felt that Haile Selassie did very little to ease their suffering. This led to a military coup d'etat by socialist factions, who imprisoned and then assassinated Selassie, while the rest of the royal family were either persecuted or fled into exile. The emperor died on August 27, 1975 at the age of 83, which ended one of the longest lasting empires in world history. After viewing Haile Selassie's tomb, my young tour guide takes me on a tour around the city and goes into a little bit more details about Ethiopian culture. Ethiopia is one of only 2 countries in Africa that was never colonized by European powers during the scramble of Africa. The other country being Liberia, although Liberia was never a target for colonization by European powers due to its ties to the United States. So it never got into an armed conflict with European powers like the wars Ethiopia fought. Now, because Ethiopia was never colonized, it's largely untapped by Western influence and has preserved its culture for thousands of years. For example, Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that does not have a European language or Arabic as its official national or business language. Ethiopia has 80 different languages, with the national language being Amharic. Ethiopia has its own alphabet, which consists of 209 symbols and 25 letter variants. Ethiopia has 80 different ethnic groups, with many of them having their own unique cultures and languages. Ethiopia doesn't go by the Gregorian calendar, which is used by most of the world, but instead they have their own calendar, which consists of 13 months. And they celebrate their New Year's not on January 1st, but on September 11th. They are also several years behind us. If it's the year 2021 in the Western world, in Ethiopia, it's only 2014. Also, time is counted differently here. Ethiopians measure time from when the sun rises. So when the sun rises at 6 a.m. on your watch, to Ethiopians, it's only 12 a.m. Their time is counted 6 hours less than their time zone, which can cause a bit of confusion if you're at a business that doesn't cater to tourists. Ethiopians have their own style of traditional clothes, fashion, and hairstyles, and they also have their own cuisine, which is famous for their national dish called injera, which is a spongy sourdough flatbread that is usually ate with vegetable and meat dishes. My young tour guide took me to the cultural center in Addis to have some injera and learn a bit more about the Ethiopian music and dances. Ethiopia also has its own type of music that has a heavy emphasis on the traditional instruments from the various regions of Ethiopia. Another thing that makes Ethiopia so unique is the way they dance. You see, West Africans have danced with their hips and butt since the beginning of time. And since black folks in the Americas and the Caribbean are descendants of West Africans, we took a lot of those traditions with us to the New World, including dancing with your hips and butt.
Cash Money Records taking over for the 99 in the 2000s.
But in East Africa, it's much different. At the Culture Center, I found out that they don't dance with their hips. Ethiopians dance with their shoulders. The dance is known as Eskista, which is Amharic for dancing shoulders. Traditionally, different kinds of Eskistas tell different stories and life lessons. These differences are by region and ethnic groups, and watching the performances at the Culture Center gave me a good glimpse into all the different flavors of Eskistas. After learning a lot about Ethiopian culture and history in Addis Ababa, it was time to visit the other parts of this great nation. On the next video, I visit Gondar, which is home to several royal castles built by the medieval kings and queens of Ethiopia. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to subscribe, and if you like this content, don't forget to hit that like button. See you guys on the next video.